I've been thinking about this for a long time, but lately it's reached a point where it's hard to even talk around it anymore. Everywhere you look, there's more money being spent, more programs announced, more services rolled out, and yet somehow the problem those programs are supposed to fix just keep getting worse. Homelessness grows, cities decay, budgets blow out, and when you ask a very basic question, who's responsible for this? The answer gets strangely blurry every time. And that's where things start to feel off. Because once you slow down and really look at how these systems work, a pattern becomes impossible to miss. Anytime there's a major issue like homelessness, immigration, food aid, crisis response, there's almost always a nonprofit sitting in the middle of those issues. Not an elected official, not a governmental agency where you can vote out. Always a nonprofit. Before anyone tries to twist this, let's be clear about what that means. In the US, most NGOs are nonprofits. So when people say NGO, what they're really talking about is a private organization doing government work with government money, but without government accountability, of course. And that didn't just happen by accident. This setup was built over time, mostly by progressive leadership that figured out something important. If you move power out of government and into nonprofits, you also move it away from voters, oversight, and consequences. On the surface, nonprofits sound harmless. They sound compassionate. They sound like helpers filling gaps. But somewhere along the way, they stopped filling gaps and became the system itself. They're now running programs, they're managing billions of taxpayer dollars, they're making decisions that affect neighborhoods like housing, migration, and public safety. And the people paying for all of it, meaning us, the taxpayers, don't really get a say. Every time this comes up, the left tries to shut the conversation down by framing it as an attack on charity. But that's not what this is. This isn't about opposing help. It's about asking why no one is ever responsible when these programs fail. And they do fail all the time. Because once responsibility disappears, failure doesn't look dramatic. It looks quiet. Standards slip. Outcomes stop mattering. Funding keeps flowing anyway. And if you look honestly at left-run cities, that's exactly what's been happening. Of course, this didn't happen all at once. It took years. Instead of running programs directly, where failure would head and land squarely on elected officials, progressive leaders chose to outsource, like immigration services, homelessness programs, housing placements, community outreach, all of it handed off to nonprofits. You might ask why. The answer is surprisingly simple, because nonprofits don't face voters. Sanctuary city leadership leaned into this model harder than anyone else did. Once a city declares itself a sanctuary, it doesn't just reject enforcement. It builds an entire nonprofit ecosystem to manage the consequences like shelters, transports, legal aid, resettlement services, all funded by taxpayers, all insulated from accountability. And when it doesn't work, when costs explode, when neighborhoods suffer, when cities start falling apart, watch how fast responsibility gets passed around. City officials blame the nonprofits blame lack of funding, and the taxpayer is left holding the bill. That's not compassion, of course. That's a shell game. This is why the nonprofit sector has ballooned the way it has. We have now over 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States, more than schools, police stations, firehouses, and hospitals combined, and pulling in hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. And yet, try getting a straight answer about results. Try tracing where the money actually went. Everything suddenly becomes vague. From the left's point of view, this setup is ideal. If a government agency fails, there are hearings, there are records, there are elections. But if a nonprofit fails, guess what? The blame resolves and dissolves. The organization rebrands, leadership moves on, funding resumes under a new name. For a long time, this stayed buried in paperwork most people never read. Then attention shifted, really when Elon Musk started talking about how corrupt the NGO ecosystem really was, and how public money disappears into nonprofit networks with almost no oversight. Once that conversation started, it became clear just how large this parallel system really is. In many major cities, like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, nonprofits now control housing placements, migrant transports, food distributions, and so-called community services. In practice, they're running core government functions without voter approval. That's not a bug, that's the design. And here's how it works in real life. Government allocates money, often federal money. Instead of running a program directly, it hands the funds to a nonprofit. That nonprofit hires administrators, of course, consultants, activists, and subcontractors. On paper, everything looks noble and organized. But once the money leaves government hands, accountability drops off fast. Qualifications aren't consistently checked, services aren't properly verified, results become optional. What really matters is staying funded. And the checks keeps clearing. So, we've already seen what that leads to. Large fraud cases tied to community and quote-unquote relief nonprofits didn't happen because the system was complicated. They really happened because no one was watching. And questioning it was treated like an insult. The same pattern shows up again and again, in progressive strongholds especially. Spending on homelessness goes up, encampments spreads, conditions get worse, yet nonprofit executives stay well paid. Migrant programs turn into permanent operations. Cities claim moral superiority while quietly asking for bailouts. And every time someone asks why things aren't improving, the answer is always the same. We just need more funding. That tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? These organizations aren't neutral. They're ideological. Their worldview shapes how services are delivered. And those services lock in certain policy outcomes. That's why so many programs are built to manage problems indefinitely instead of fixing them. Think about it. There's also a political benefit that rarely gets talked about. Nonprofits give the left a taxpayer-funded workforce. How? They hire activists, they run civic engagement, they shape narratives, they influence elections, all while claiming to be a political service provider. That's not charity, is it? No, it's not. That's political infrastructure. For years, anyone who questioned this was labeled heartless, anti-compassion, anti-help. And that fear worked for a while. It did work. The system kept growing. What we're dealing with now isn't few bad actors. It's a structure built by progressive leadership that intentionally stripped accountability out of public spending. When public agencies fail, there's a clear line of responsibility. With nonprofits, that line is blurred on purpose. Money disappears, leaders deny involvement, organizations dissolve or rename themselves. Funding continues in the meantime. The public pays again. You and I, the taxpayer, pays again and again. Now, that structure is finally being challenged. Not because people stopped caring, but because the results are impossible to ignore. Cities are worse off. Budgets are wrecked. Trust is gone. But there's one more thing that doesn't get said enough. Nonprofits don't just run programs. They help write policy. They advise lawmakers. They testify at hearings. They frame debates, all while presenting themselves as neutral experts. They're not neutral. They're funded, and funding drives behavior. So, when cities change oversight, like zoning rewritten, shelters imposed, budgets redirected without real public input, that's not disorder. That's ideology governing through intermediaries. And always the outcome is predictable. Taxpayers disengaged. Communities lose faith. And the people these programs claim to help are left in worse shape. Let me tell you, that didn't happen because Americans stopped caring. It happened because leaders built a system where no one has to answer for failure. Charity was never meant to replace government or override voters. It was meant to support a system that works. When public money moves into private hands, responsibility shouldn't vanish with it. Most of what's broken today didn't break by accident. It broke because accountability was pushed out of reach on purpose. And let me leave you with this today. A serious society doesn't worship nonprofits. It holds them to the same standard as any public program. Asking where did the money go isn't cruelty. Asking for results isn't hate. Demanding accountability isn't radical. It's basic responsibility. That's the American backdrop. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.